Key point curve tools in Alias provide you as a designer with kind of like a basic set of 2D CAD-like drafting tools. You find the key point curve toolbox inside curves. Now, what's the difference to SCV curve? I can draw a line, for example, with the key point curve. I could also go to here, set a degree 1, and for example, I'm just snap dragging the same. Oops. I would like to select the complete curve there, and let's move it to somewhere else. Okay, essentially they're both the same. However, the only difference is actually, you see 1 degree, 1 span, is that in Alias, key point curves have kind of like a little bit of extra information added to it to bend them into the shape you need. So for example, if we go to information window and click on this one, we have a transform information, curve geometry, yada yada yada. However, if we click the key point curve, in addition, we have attributes. So for example, a length. So I can set this one exactly to a specific dimension. That feature you do not have with normal curves. So let's move this one to the side. And that basically means that whenever you create key point curves, you can perfectly dimension them. You can't really dimension normal curves because they're bent, and everything that is linear or can be described as an arc or a circle can perfectly be dimensions. So let's take a look at how they all work. It's actually very simple. So with the circle, we can click at a center and drag out the radius. Now, Alias does not have actually the ability to draw, for example, a dimension, so left and right, and then it opens it as a circle. It only, as a circle, for example, has radius. But actually, we can work with something similar. I'm going to show you soon. You can create an ellipse, so center point, 1 radius, and then actually you can go ahead, select the ellipse, and for example adjust the minor and major axis. So in contrast to a solid modeler, or which uses sketch planes a lot, like Inventor or SolidWorks, or for example Rhino, the drawing tools here are a little bit slim, I would say, but they're still very, very useful. So for example, we have the square tool. So you see, like, you define upper left, lower right corner, and then there it tells you width and height. Then, for example, we have an arc tool. So the arc tool is interesting, and we have multiples. So you can click, click, and click, and you see it actually from the first point to the second to the third. So for example, if we do the same, like click, click, and click here, you see I can also continue dragging it. So it runs basically through this point. So quite useful for when, for example, you need to create an arc kind of like this. Okay. So for example, what else do we have? If you double click them also, you get the amount of degree and span, for example, you would like to use here. With this one, we click, click, and then actually you drag out the center point. So move it this way. And also here, for example, for the radius, we can clean this one up. We can change everything. Oh, it didn't let me do this. It should here. 4. Oh, this is interesting. 270. 90. 4. No. Oh, yeah. I typed something in that was way too small for it, so it didn't really work. So hold on. Let me go back to here. So click, click, and click. Okay, so now this one. And again, I can change this one. I can change this one to 5. I can go down to something that's too small if I make this one 10. Or if I make this one 40. You see, like, there's this point. So you have to understand a little bit of geometry, of course. So this is like the radius of 10. There's also, for example, to make an arc that's concentric, or for example, to make an arc that is tangent out of a line. So for example, click and click, there's our line. Let's go to this one. So Control Alt. And now this arc which I'm creating is tangent. So you see how it flows out. Okay, let's take a look at lines. Very simple. Left right click, you have length. There are different types of lines. We can also have zigzag lines. So those are, it's like a polyline. So they're simply joined together. I will keep this one. Actually, no. For the moment, I show you this one. You see here we have join and break. This actually means that you can break or join lines like in Illustrator. Break, break, and break. See, now I can select those. And if we go back to join, I click on a corner point where 2 points meet. And you see then they're joined. And when you join them, you see the lengths of all these lines together. So this is actually pretty nice. Perfect. Okay, let's go to maybe parallel. So select a curve to make a parallel line to this one. And then here and there's my parallel line. So very easy. Let's make another normal line and parallel. Oops. Select this line, drag it out, and you see the distance there. Curious if this actually works. No, you can't on this polyline, only on the segments. Okay. What else do we have? An angle. Select a curve to make a line to add an angle to. So for example, this one. And then there. You can specify the radius. Okay. Next, let's take a look at how we can draw a line, for example, perpendicular to something, between, or tangent. So let's create maybe an ellipse. And then let's click the perpendicular. And down here you see from curve. So I can click on this curve. I don't have to click Control Alt, I just select this curve. And you see I decide where a slider is. FYI, if I want to have a very specific point, this is, for example, a good situation where maybe we can work with the snap grid. So then I can press Control Alt and you see I have all these snap targets. So maybe here. Nope. Maybe I would like to have something that's more kind of like 8 segments there. So at this point, and then I click somewhere else, and then you see it drags out a line. It also dimensions the distance. Here's the point, so I could say this one maybe 12 millimeters. Next, and then there is your line that's perpendicular to there. Now you can actually also create, if we double click it and say not from a curve but to a curve, so go. So I click somewhere here, and then I click to where it should be perpendicular to. And it doesn't need to be a curve. I can also make it on a line. So that's, for example, how you create a perpendicular line to an object or from an object. So let's go and take a look at this one. What do we have here? Double click to see there are no options. Okay. So what does it say? Use mouse to enter start point. There you see now it made it tangent to there. So maybe here, and then click this line. You see that it creates this line tangent to here. So this, of course, will not work because tangent, that means it needs to be exactly on the same line, but I can click it on here, there. So see, it's not very difficult to create lines this way. Okay, next one. This is actually a little bit more interesting. So let's say you have some gears or other objects and you need a line that's in between. So here to maybe there, then it creates a line that's tangent to those parts. There, and there, there, and there. And you see, these lines were not created where I clicked. I simply specified the side. So let me delete those and do it again. So I click somewhere on this inside and somewhere on here, and then it creates it there. Now, maybe I should have clicked here. So you see the order is important. Okay. That's how, for example, you create lines that are tangent between two parts. Now to create something that's perpendicular between each, unfortunately, there we might actually be slightly out of luck. So again, that's maybe where other tools have more tool sets, but Alias is not really a CAD application. It just provides you with some basic 2D drafting tools. So let's see actually if we can figure this one out, because there's also no, yeah, it doesn't really have an option directly for that. Kind of like what we would need is like a perpendicular tool where you could say you and you and make myself please a perpendicular line between those two, but we only have the tangent one, unfortunately. Okay, what do we have here? The arc. Use and always pay attention to your interface. Use mouse to enter arc point. Ah, I see. Yeah, true. You just create a line and then let's do this again. So click and click. So this is a nice line, and then here's my radius, my arc, I meant to say. So it creates it for you. And again, those are two objects. I can simply break them. See, there are. I can also join them. Oops, I have to click on this point where to join. And then actually let's click them, and you see there's a line and there's an arc. And maybe 3. Doesn't do it. 6. 5. 4. Yeah, well, can get smaller. Okay. However, there's something else I can show you now. That join and break, and there's this drag. So with drag, it's different than, for example, clicking an object and then moving. And we have select CV. There are no CVs. We have select edit points. There are no edit points. But there are those blue points, and they can be used with the drag one. So we could actually click on something and nothing happens. And I mentioned before, always pay attention to what's going to be presented there. It said to a snap mode must be on to move key points in perspective window. So interestingly, I'm an orthographic. Yeah, true. This is actually a perspective view, just FYI. And we also have a dedicated top view. So this is just straight top view. You see my 3D cube is gone. And now here I can actually drag those easily because I'm more or less now really in a 2D drafting. There, for example, you see I can adjust the radius by simply repositioning those points. I can also change the midpoint. So here I would say arc should stop here. I could say the center, so the radius. So now I'm working with the radius of this arc, more or less, and now I'm going to work with the diameter. Now I'm going to snap this one to there. No, I can't do this actually. Interesting. Okay, well, makes sense. There and there. So you see here, for example, and there it breaks. So just be careful that only because you change this line, this radius doesn't update. While they are joined, they're not like constrained, I would say, that when I move this point down, that this arc rotates with it. So if you draft, actually, if you need to do something like this, it might actually be a good idea. So it's easier for you to switch to those views, or simply what I do, maintain working in perspective, just switch to orthographic. To do the same, all we need to do is press the Alt key for the grid snapping, or for example, the curve snapping. See, I can also snap those points onto something. There. Okay, and I think that basically covers nearly everything in terms of key point curves. The key point curves also create, let me go back to general settings, they create those guidelines. You see all those guidelines here we created. Every time when you create a new line, there, for example, there to there, it also adds a line. I mean, they're not necessarily bad, but I feel like sometimes they can be very confusing, which is why you can either, after you drew, you can delete all those guidelines, or simply go to general preferences and set this one to 0. And then you don't have to delete those. You also don't get them or don't see those guidelines. But honestly, I never really worked with them, to be quite honest. Because with the drafting tools and the grid, that's basically all I really need. And yeah, that's really, I think, everything about key point curves and 2D drafting in Alias.